Stephen Dale Pettit is in the studio with me. I mean, you grew up in Orange County in California. Stevie Ray Vaughan you would have known, but did you know about Rory Gallagher at that point?
Sure. All the people, I include him in the British blues boom guitar heroes, really. And I knew about all those guys.
Yeah. How do you rate Rory?
He's somebody who was he wasn't as massive in the States as, say, the Jimmy Pages or the Jeff Becks or the Eric Claptons, the Peter Greens or the Mick Taylors, and so on and so forth. But he was kind of a hidden treasure in that sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of my mates were well into him.
Yeah.
And I thought he was great, the stuff that they played me.
Fabulous guitarist, lovely, lovely guy as well.
I never met him.
Yeah, he was. But I was describing him playing on the Old Grey Whistle Test, and you've set up with a similar kind of situation around me in our small studio here, Stephen. Before we go any further, just introduce us to the guys in your band.
We've got Chris Borad on upright bass today. We've got Lorenzo Mouflet playing the harmonica. And we have Gary O'Toole hitting some skins.
There's just a great quote of yours, Stephen. The reason I'm on the planet is to play blues guitar. I'm on a mission to spread the word about the blues and about the guitar, especially to young music lovers. Now, I know the extent to which this has resonated with Paul Jones on Radio 2, because I know you've been on Paul's programme a couple of times.
That's right.
He's a torchbearer in a very big way as well, isn't it? So what is it then about blues music that first kind of infused you? When did you suddenly realise that this music existed?
Really young, and it got me before I realised what it was. That's the truth of it. Once I started to hear these guitar bands, and they were chiefly, in the beginning, the UK bands, Cream, Zeppelin, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, Hendrix. I consider him to be really part of swing in London. And once I started to listen to that, that was it. It was all over, job done.
That was an amazing thing that happened, wasn't it? Because obviously, the Stones, the Kinks, the Pretty Things, these bands were influenced by the blues and R&B music that they'd been listening to.
Well, they were obsessed, weren't they?
They were, but America had almost lost interest in that until the British musicians reintroduced it into America. And then came a new generation of American white blues musicians inspired by the fact that these English guys have been playing them this stuff, but that then had prompted them to dig back into their own heritage. It was an amazing kind of full circle thing.
Yeah, basically, absolutely correct. And quite interesting that it was totally overlooked, as you said, by most people in America. It took the Rolling Stones to get Howlin' Wolf on national TV.
Yeah.
For example.
Yes. So 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and you got a guitar then?
I got a guitar when I was 8.
Yep. What was it?
It was an acoustic, and then I got my first electric a little bit later, which was a Gibson SG Special. I convinced my parents to get me electric. My mom wanted me, I think she had some sort of vision of me being like a sensitive singer-songwriter, like James Taylor or something. So she wanted me to keep the acoustic.
Yes.
And I did have a few lessons at the time, and I remember conflabs between my guitar teacher and my mom, How do we keep him off the electric? I got the go-ahead on the electric, and my dad did the research, and we came back, and my mom thought we were going to get some sort of cheap, like a silver tone or something, and so she was not best pleased when we came back with this Gibson SG. My dad, of course, just said, don't worry about it, this is what you got to have.
Yeah. Built to last.
Absolutely. I wish I'd kept it.
So then, schoolboy band,
I was
mates
forming.
at school.
I was forming a band from the minute I had. Well, actually, probably before that. From when I was 8, I was forming bands. But certainly, once the electric arrived and the amp, Fender Twin Reverb.
That was it.
Actually, no, it was a Super Deluxe, is what it was. I think a Super. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not remembering it correctly. I think it's a Super Reverb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And enough to wake the neighbours.
Yes. Because Southern California, then, the kind of gigs, the venues and stuff that would be around you there, Stephen. Because obviously, we know a fair bit about the LA and San Francisco music scene of the mid-'60s.
Yeah.
Birds and Love and The Doors, and then up in San Francisco, Grateful Dead and Janis and Quicksilver Messenger Service and Steve Miller and all of that.
Yeah.
So where you were in California, was that all spilling over to your neck of the woods as well?
Certainly. I mean, there was a club called the Golden Bear, which is on the same circuit as the Whiskey A Go-Go, for example, national circuit. So Dylan played there. Hendrix played there. I didn't. I was far too young. But this place called the Golden Bear had B.B. King there, and I went there and met, and Albert King there, who I went there and met and hung out with, actually, on his tour bus out in front of the show. So, yes, it was spilling over. It was a great thing to have on your doorstep. Literally, it was, a few miles from where I lived.
Yeah. Stephen Dale Petit is here with us on Radio 2. And I know it was before your time, Stephen, but, I remember venues in London like Klux Clique or the Crawdaddy Club or even the Ealing Club that, was Alexis Corner used to run a night there in the sort of early mid-'60s. I mean, before you were born, I know that. But you're kind of creating music that could have been played at that moment.
Well, that's a massive compliment for me, anyways. I mean, what a great thing, because I knew about that club, the Ealing Club, when I was 12. I knew about the Crawdaddy. I knew about Alexis Corner and Cyril Davies. And, it just held huge fascination for me and great, seductiveness, really, because I'm here, aren't I? So I moved here.
Alexis was a giant figure. I mean, we were lucky as well. There was Alexis, there was Mike Vernon, Blue Horizon, John Mayall, central figures in introducing us to the real core of this music. So we were very fortunate in Britain, in London, to have these great figures around us that we're bringing, for Alexis playing guitar on stage, which she did with Muddy Waters and people like this, you think you died and gone to heaven. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just fantastic. When you came to London then, you got over here in the late 80s?
Yeah.
So what brought you to London then? How come you...
I just became an Anglophile. I just realized that all this music that really held sway, that held me under its spell, actually, was British, UK-based. Even though I was listening to and becoming besotted by all this blues stuff, the 1920s records of Charlie Patton and all that stuff, there's something about, I think, the packaging that was done, the marketing that was done, because the album covers of, let's say, the Cream, Disraeli Gears, for example, spoke to me 2 decades later, however long it was down the road, in a way that a Robert Johnson album, we didn't have, that's a bad example, a B.B. King album cover didn't. The blues album cover seemed quite austere, quite adult and scholastic almost, and very strict in a certain way. And all that really mattered to a kid.
Yes.
Me,
no, I know
as a
exactly.
kid.
Because they look like you just pulled them out of a library shelf, don't they?
Exactly.
Whereas the Cream album covers were kind of colour explosions.
Yeah.
And...
Also, something happened with the music. You were talking about how lucky that London was to have all these clubs and all these musicians doing what they were doing. Something happened when blues arrived on these shores. And I say, as often as I can, that I can consider the contribution of the UK musicians equal to that of the pioneers of the blues. And as well, punk had happened, and I liked a lot of that. A lot of those punks considered it to be year zero and thought that they were starting from scratch. But in actual fact, the blues was actually a big part of punk as well, because the MC5 were lionized by all the punks, the Pistols and all those guys, the Clash, as was Iggy Pop. And Iggy Pop, I'm sure you know, set off to be a bluesman in Chicago before he became Iggy Pop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but what also was interesting about that moment was that so much of that music was coming off 1.5 minute, 2 minute singles. Those bands in 76, 77 were going into the studio and spending 3 hours making 3 tracks, the way that old blues
Exactly.
and rock and roll records used to be made.
I mean, blues was actually the first DIY kind of approach as well.
Yeah.
It was a punk in its day, absolutely.
Yeah. I've invited you to choose music to bring in with you, and the first track that we're going to play is The Clash. So I Fought the Law then. Would you have heard the Bobby Fuller 4 version of this before you heard The Clash, or was it the other way around?
No, I heard the Bobby Fuller 4 version first because it was used in TV shows and it was used in films, and there was loads of stations that played that sort of stuff. You drive around California and you can't escape. You have to go with the local radio station. So I would have heard it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Because you met Mick Jones, didn't you, when he came to London?
Yeah, and funnily enough, what I found pleasantly shocking, I guess, is that he loved all that blues stuff. I mean, if you take London Calling's got out-and-out blues songs on it, really. Just rockabilly-esque, I guess, in terms of the way that they've sped it up or treated the feel. But he loves that Beano album.
Well, let's listen to this, because this is a great record. This is the Clash version of I Fought the Law. Just brilliant. The Clash, I Fought the Law. The choice of Stephen Dale Petit, who's with me in the studio. And I pulled that single out of the box set of singles, Stephen,
Yeah.
that came out a couple of years or so ago.
I think
and
so.
I love this collection, don't you? Because they've beautifully kind of recreated the original singles and the original sleeves and everything. It looks really, really good.
Yeah, they've even gone to the trouble of printing what looks to be a record label on the inside of the CD.
Yeah.
In an exact replica of what the vinyl looked like.
That's it.
Yeah, really great.
And your second choice is Jeff Beck. Now, as a guitarist, I'm so interested in your take on Jeff Beck, because he is a kind of guitarist's guitarist, isn't he? Do you think he's kind of more appreciated by other guitarists than he has been in the sort of wider public?
I guess. I don't quite know why that is. I guess there's something to that. I mean, for me, he's the best guitar player on the planet, bar none. He's just astounding.
And what makes you say that?
Well, he combines ferocity with subtlety. He's got extremely strong technique, and he gets all sorts of sounds out of a guitar that really nobody else has. I mean, he's taken the door opened by Hendrix. He's sort of taken it a step further, and he manages to not, in my opinion, to not err on the side of gymnastics. He's got great technique, but he's always melodic. He's always got stunning, beautiful melodies going on. You know, you get somebody like an Eddie Van Halen or Steve Vai, and I find them awfully tedious after a while.
Well, it's that wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow thing, isn't it, that's going on?
And Jeff Beck was encouraged. I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting him and sort of had his ear for about 3.5 hours one night at an after party for a Stones gig at Ronnie Wood's place, and just asked him every question that I could ever have imagined wanting to ask him. He was just fantastic. And he was encouraged by Giorgio Gomelski to be as out there and as inventive as he humanly could.
Yeah.
And that's just held sway with him ever since.
Yes.
So he's really kind of in a whole league of his own, I think.
I suppose it's the equivalent of sort of word economy, isn't it? I suppose it's playing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't overstate.
He never overstates. It's always just exactly right. And the song we're about to play, I just melt when I hear it. You know, the slide playing on it, it shows, you know, certainly the lyrical, melodic grace that he can play with. So many of his solos just have all these components combined. But this is really sort of showcasing the lyrical beauty that he can conjure with his slide and his guitar.
And it's called Definitely Maybe, even years before Oasis had probably even thought of it. Jeff Beck, it's Max Middleton
Playing that
on
outro
keyboards.
keyboard solo, one of my favorite all-time keyboard moments ever on recorded on you know, what is it now? On MP3.
Yeah. It's Stephen Dale Pettit with us in the studio tonight, and we could talk all night, actually, Stephen. I'm so enjoying our conversation a lot, but if we do that, we won't have time for another number, so we should hear you play again.
We should hear the other song,
yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
This one is called A Better Answer.
Stephen Dale Pettit, here with us on Radio 2 on the Bob Harris Show. And, you know, we're going to sort of shoehorn a final moment of conversation in here, Stephen, because catching up now with everything.
Yeah.
When you set about recording your own music, I mean, you set about doing this in a completely kind of independent way, didn't you?
Totally.
Yeah.
I just basically hung on to the excitement that I felt when I was listening to a lot of the blues records the first time, and tried to recreate that feeling when I was listening back. It's as simple as that. And trying to divorce myself that I was listening to myself. I mean, I just held myself to a certain standard and prayed that would work.
And keep away from all the corporate stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. At no point did I consider anything other than making music that I felt that should be heard. No thought for commercial considerations whatsoever. It was really about this music needs to be heard, and I'm going to do what I can about that.
Yes. So October 2009 then, where does everything sit, the balance of everything? You've been working with Mick Taylor. You did gigs with him earlier this year.
Yeah, we had a tour all up and down the country with Mick, which was great. It was fantastic working with him.
And the album The Crave.
That's morphed into a double album. So it's taken a little bit longer to complete, but we're right in the smack dab in the middle of it.
So when will that be coming out, do you think?
We're hoping for something like February, March, April latest.
And I want to play As the Years Go Passing By to round things off. And I mean, again, there are a couple of connections here. Because this song originally came out in 1967, and people do talk about this. I mean, you're quoted as saying that this was the riff that Albert King used on the original of this was one of the inspirations for Layla.
There is nothing I can do. You speed that up. That's the main line from the song.
Yeah.
The melody.
Yeah.
The sung melody. And depending on who you hear it from or read it from in this instance, either Greg Allman, Dwayne Allman, or the bass player came up with this idea. Because the Allman Brothers were jamming with Eric Clapton in Criteria in Miami. And so becomes Layla.
Yeah.
To be fair, nobody ever tried to say that they made it up. They paid their respects to the riff from the beginning.
Yeah. This has been a pleasure, Stephen. Thanks to all of you guys. Thanks for coming in, and good luck with everything, Stephen.
Thanks so much for having us in.